Hi friends, it's Minicorn, and today we have a somewhat chatty, somewhat discussion video about book covers, and I'm assuming it's gonna be on the longer side, so grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if you like. Now, who doesn't like pretty book covers? I'm sure we have all seen videos comparing and discussing about the UK and US edition on the internet. As a reader who lives in the States, sometimes I found myself seeking for book covers from other countries as well. However, because I also read in Chinese, so I can't help but notice the similarity and the differences between languages, and they're just so interesting to look into. So today I thought we can compare the covers mostly between the Chinese and the English edition, but sometimes I will show you book covers from other languages as well, and we can have a chat about them. Before I dive in, there are a couple of things that I want to quickly address. First of all, the English covers that I'm gonna show you will be the ones that I'm most familiar with, or the ones that I feel like most accessible. The second thing is, if you haven't checked out Katie's video about book covers comparison from her channel Books and Things yet, I highly recommend you guys to do so. She made an amazing video talking all about the differences behind book covers, the marketing strategy. She was talking about more from the publishing side because she published her debut novel this year, and I learned so much from her video. And since then, I have a new perspective when I was looking into different book covers. And a lot of things that I'm gonna talk about today are inspired by her video. So I will link her video down below if you haven't checked it out. And today, the things that I'm gonna be talking about is more from the reader side because I don't work related to the publishing industry. And of course, it's gonna be all subjective. So if you have any ideas or thoughts that's different from mine, please leave a comment down below so we can chat about them. So 3 different categories of books that I'm gonna talk about today. The first one is Chinese books translated into English market, and the second one is English books that are translated into Chinese market but with very different covers, even titles. And the third one is English book translated into the Chinese reading market but with similar covers and titles. Now let's look at Chinese books translated into English first. And for these books, I find they often have a drastically change into the cover art or even the title. For example, Strange Beast of China, a urban fantasy by Yan Ge. The hardcover is the one that I've seen the most common, and this is the paperback of the same book. But this is the cover when it first published in China, and the OG title of this book is just called Strange Beasts or Strange Beasts Catalog. No China in the title. Same thing as Chinese food is just called food in China. To me, clearly, both English covers tell more stories. It is very obvious that the setting of the story is set in a city or a town. Even though the paperback cover is more vague, it still has the cityscape behind it. 2 different elements on both covers, the unusual colored moon on the hardback and also the feather on the paperback, both indicate there's something strange is happening in the city. And of course, the English title added China for marketing purpose. In comparison, the Chinese cover doesn't show you the storytelling or the story setting, but it still indicated a very strange vibe. First of all, the color choice is very unusual. Yellow is very eye-catching and it's not used as much as a main element on book covers that often. And also, although there's no illustrations or pictures on this book, there's still some irregular lines around the author's name that indicate that the things are not streamlined. And the main event on the cover is of course the title, and every stroke of the title has their own thoughts, has their own twist, and the smaller words around the title are actually the names of each beast. So you can get this is a catalog of beasts from this cover. While it's on the English ones, you don't see any beasts at all. Now let's quickly look at another book of Yan Ge. This is the Chili Bean Placed Clan, and on the cover is a very bold color with, I would like to say it's a chili bean, but I feel like it feels like half peach and half pomegranate. And on the Chinese cover, you can see a family portrait because the title of this book in Chinese is actually just called Our Family or Our Clan. Moving on, let's talk about a classic Chinese wuxia book. Chinese wuxia is a little bit like Western fantasy, except that they are actually very different. So there's no magic in the books and people are fighting using different genres of martial arts. I actually made a video about it like years ago, which I'll link it down below. So back to book covers. One of the most classic Chinese wuxia is called 射雕英雄传, The Legend of Condor Heroes. And one of the classic covers looks like this. In Chinese, it's actually published into 4 for 5 small volumes. However, when you buy them as a whole, and they're all called Legend of Condor Heroes. They're just called book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you treat them all together as one book. In the English-speaking world, the concept of series works a little bit different than the Chinese one, and this book is also published into different volumes. I believe there are 4 small volumes. However, they all have their different individual names and different individual cover design. So although the whole series is still called The Legend of Condor Heroes, the 4 individual volumes are called A Hero Born, A Bound and Down, A Snake Lies Waiting, and A Heart Divided. So this is already an interesting marketing choice, and you can really tell the difference between each markets and the different habits of readers. The English covers that you're looking at right now is the ones that I have 2 books from. I really like this edition of covers. I feel like they each have individual elements from related to the volume titles, and the colors are cohesive. However, I'm not sure if you can still find them widely out in the market, because when I was researching for this video, these are the covers that I found. See, in the Chinese cover, if you look closely, you can see actually there are 2 people on the cover walking on the road, but they're so vague and they blend within the background, so you can almost ignore them. And also, I don't even think that they are from the story. They're just like people happen to be there, which indicates that compared to the characters, the most important element in this book is actually the historical period and the environment that the people are in. To my understanding, although the book has so many great characters, this is the vibe that I feel like is more fitting to the whole story. However, on this new English version, color aside, each volume has a human figure on it. They are our heroes in the title, which actually give out a strong individual heroism vibe. To me, this is a conventional way to market a fantasy book to emphasize certain heroes in the story, but the different emphasis in different markets are very obvious here. And not to mention that the characters are painted in the Chinese traditional inking style, which tells you that the story was set in China. I don't quite understand the color choices of the new English version. To me, the older English version is just much more visually pleasant, but I guess they stand out in a bunch of books in the bookshop, so what do you think? Last in this category, let's talk about a modern classic. This is To Live by Yu Hua. This is a cover that I read from. It's very simplistic, very minimal. The all-black cover tells you that this is not gonna be an easy story to read, and you can see Yu Hua's signature on the cover, which indicates that he is already a profound writer when this book was published. However, although he's super popular already, his name is still not bigger than the book title, which sometimes in the English publishing world, if the writer is super famous, their name will be larger than the book title, and they confused me so much when I first started to look into English books. And this is the cover of the English translation. I have actually seen some of you guys reading this version, and of course, very different from the Chinese one. First of all, we have storytelling on the cover. We have part of a human figure on the cover wearing traditional clothing, so it tells you the setting of this book probably is historical, probably is a character-driven story. The picture, however, is in black and white, echoes the black tone of the Chinese cover, tells you that this is not a cheerful, vibrant story. And the bottom of the book has the pattern that is commonly used in traditional Chinese design, which tells you again the book is set in China, and it brought us some colors. Green is the color of life. I'm thinking maybe this color choice is to echo with the book title To Live, and also maybe the publisher doesn't want to intimidate us further from the black and white. While I was doing research for this video, I found that this book has been translated into so many different languages, and there are 2 outstanding covers that I really like. The first one is a Turkish one, and this is what it looked like. I love this cover so much. I feel like this is so brilliant. The strokes in Chinese calligraphy tells us so many stories. First of all, it tells us the setting of the story is probably in China. And secondly, because of the strokes serve as blackout, it actually has so many emotions in it. It tells us maybe the story is so complicated and there's just no right word for it. It also maybe tells us that the book tries to tell its story, but it's also at the same time, it doesn't want us to know. Now we have the polished cover, which is very interesting. This darker shade of yellow, which is different from the Strange Beast of China one, is often used in warning signs, especially if it were used with black together, which we also have on the cover. So the color shows us a sense of urgency. And in the middle, we have a bowl of rice, which is very essential in Chinese food culture. So we have a urgent rice eating situation, which probably tells you that there are some struggles going on. Before I'm doing research for this video, I actually have no idea that this book has been translated into so many languages, and now I have a new respect for Yuhua. By the way, I love this book and I highly recommend it. And these books are the ones that I want to look into from the first category, which is the Chinese books translated into different languages. And we can tell, although they are very different books, they are somewhat still using China as one of their marketing strategy, and some books even added China into their titles or cover design, which is understandable, but also I feel like it indicates that there are not enough Chinese books translated into other languages yet, so the publishers still need to use China as a one common element when marketing the books. I'm just hoping that in the future there will be more books translated so books can shine by their uniqueness and not their common theme, which is China. And now let's look at next category, English books translated into Chinese. The first book I want us to look at is The Way of Kings, because the color differences of this book is just fascinating. And by the way, I'm currently in the middle of this book. I'm reading it as my way to venture into fantasy genre, and I'm loving it. And these are the US and the UK cover. These covers are already been discussed and compared a lot on the internet, and this is also the rare case where I actually prefer the US cover. Let me show you the Chinese cover. So this is the Chinese cover, and before you say anything, let me show you the Japanese cover. So these are the Japanese cover, and we can see that in Japan it's been published into 3 different small volumes, and they are called The Way of Kings 1, 2, 3. First of all, let's go back to the Chinese cover. As we know, The Way of Kings is an epic fantasy, and the writing is seriously beautiful. From the English cover, especially the US one, you can get this sense of isolation, as if the Way of Kings is a hard and difficult, lonely way. And the landscape behind is also showing us the vastness of the world. Kitty mentioned in her video that the US cover often have more of a storytelling compared to the UK one, and I really agree on these book covers. However, the Chinese cover here also tells you a story, but it looks like a completely different story. We have a group of soldiers fighting, which is true, as something that happens in the book, but this mosaic and cartoony style of illustration just deliver a completely different vibe compared to the seriousness of the English versions. In the English-speaking world, fantasies are grouped by the audience's age group, like we have adult fantasy, we have YA fantasy, we have middle grade fantasy, but I don't think it's that distinguished in the Chinese-speaking world. And this cover design just makes you think that they are marketing towards a younger group of audience. If you remember the cover of the Legends of Condor Heroes, you can tell that clearly that book is marketing towards a older age group. And now let's look at the Japanese covers. I know little to nothing about the Japanese publishing industry, but it's just interesting to see that how their covers has this very anime or like JRPG style of illustration, which happens to not only fantasy but a lot of different genres, sometimes even on murder mysteries or literary fiction. I guess anime is just a huge part of Japanese pop culture. And in this very example, they're using the whole anime elements to show you that they're definitely magic elements in the story and people are fighting. I feel like it's also very gamified and it's very Japan, if I may say so. The next book we're looking into has a very different UK and US cover already, and the Chinese cover is even different on another level because it even has a different title. The book is Lessons in Chemistry, and the Chinese title is called 妙不可言, which means incredibly wonderful, which tells us nothing about the story. And this is not a single case. Actually, oftentimes in the Chinese reading market, the title, the book design, and also even the blurb can be very ambiguous. I can't tell you how many times after I read a blurb of the book, I still don't know what's going on. And in the case of this cover, the title tells you like nothing, but there are many elements on the cover that tells you a lot of things in the story. So when we look at the UK version, we see a very strong historical vibe. However, when we're looking at the US cover, we don't see that at all. Instead, we're getting a very strong beach read and rom-com signal, and the color of the Chinese cover is also very fluffy, and I feel like the design is also not historical at all, and it caters to the American interpretation of this book. Especially when you look at it closely, it has a sentence on the cover. It says, 我们是被彼此所吸引的，那种化学反应绝非偶然。It means that we are attracted to each other. The chemistry between us is not a coincidence, which may I say is a false representation of the story, but definitely set the whole tone of the story into a romance novel. And because I have already read the story, I think I can say that the word chemistry has so many different layers of meanings in the story. So I'm actually very curious about the publisher's choice of publishing this book as a different entirely title. However, I also looked into the traditional Chinese translation version of this book, and this time the title is called Lessons in Chemistry. And from the cover, you can see all the same elements as the simplified version, but in a completely different style. And they also have a sentence on the cover, but this time it says, don't let the world fool you when they talk you down, to all the brilliant women who refuse to be tamed. And now we're talking, this is the book where I feel like I'm more likely to pick up if I don't know anything about the story. And I also like how it has so many elements on the cover, but it actually doesn't spoil the story at all. So at this point, I'm just curious about why so many publishers decided to publish this book as a romance novel, as I myself personally prefer other potential of this book so much more. And I also looked into other translations of this book because there's so many, and I also like this Siberian cover very much. The Thai version is also very interesting. It feels like you went into the TV setting in the UK version, and this Estonian version actually emphasis on the action part, which I feel like very unique. And last but not least, we have this Ukrainian version, which I feel like the main character will be mad if she saw that. Next, let's take a look at Little Fire Everywhere. I believe when the book was first published, the US and the UK version all look like this. You get the sense of a community, and the story is probably happening in a neighborhood. However, although the title is called Little Fire Everywhere, you actually don't see any flames on the cover, which may intrigue you to look into the story. On the contrary, the Chinese title looks like this. It looks like a literary translation or interpretation of the title Little Fire Everywhere, and the Chinese title is actually not called that. It's called Teeny Tiny Tiny Teeny Flames. As you can see, the first 4 characters are the same one, and they all mean small. So nothing is happening on the cover except that we know there are flames. And again, we have a sentence on the cover. It says, every time when you are breathing, you should remember that you should always live the life that you want. I don't think I ever seen the books in English have sentence or a quote on its cover. I feel like it's a very unique thing that at least the Chinese publisher do. I quite like this Chinese cover actually. I feel like the style of paper cutting is very unique, and it's sending out this very urgent vibe because there are indeed already little fires everywhere. Internationally, the French cover looks very different, and it almost seems like an entire different book. First of all, we have the author's name larger than the title, which is something that I have never seen in Chinese books. And the smoky effect of the fire and the dark tone actually make it looks like a thriller to me. On the other hand, the Indonesia version also has a dark tone, but it's very different compared to the French one. It's almost feel like dystopian and not as thrilling. One final book before we move on to another category, I want to talk about a nonfiction, and it is This Is Going to Hurt, The Secret Diary of a Junior Doctor, and this is the cover that I read from. And this is another very popular English cover, and from the cover and the title of the book that we know it is not going to be an easy read. However, this is the Chinese cover, and the title literally translated to Hilarious Diaries from a Doctor Who Abandoned Their Practice. This feels like a completely different book and a whole big misunderstanding. I read the English version of the book and agree that although with the humor tone, at times this book can be very heartbreaking and very painful to read. So personally, I just cannot imagine how this book was marketed to the Chinese audience. There are so many other books that are translated into Chinese with more unique designs and different book titles, but of course there are also books that are translated into Chinese with similar designs to the English one, and I don't even think that I need to show you the English cover for you to know that they are the same book. For example, we have A Little Life here, with the English title literally point along with the Chinese one. Babel, the only difference from the English one is that they don't have the author's name name printed the same size with the book title. It's just not something that the Chinese books ever do. Normal people with the exact same illustrations, we see the English name of the book title and the English name of the author all printed at the same size on the cover. In this case, I feel like they are part of the cover design because the author's name are printed in Chinese books, and they are smaller and on top of the book. And lastly, we have Project Hail Mary with the book title replaced the English title and also the author's name in the center. And that's all the examples that I have today. I'm sure with more research, we can have way more interesting findings. In general, I feel like looking into different covers can tell us so much more about the reading community, about the cover design in different countries, about the publishing industry, and about the books in so many different ways, which is fascinating. So I hope you had fun watching this video, and if you are here at this point, please tell me which is your favorite cover in this entire video. And of course, let me know if you have any thoughts or ideas, and don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below, and thumbs up to this video if you liked it. I wish you happy reading, stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!